are darker than blue. Don't let us hang around this town and let what others say come true. We're just good for nothing. They all figure a boy's grown up shoulders. Peace, everyone. It is Friday at 5 o'clock. It's Friday, December 19th. And that must mean this is Darker Than Blue. And if this is Darker Than Blue, then I am Jackie Lukeman. Thank you so much for joining me this dreary, kind of too warm, a little chilly, a little drizzly, a little damp Friday in December. We're all kind of trying to wind down a little bit from our very hectic and chaotic year. Trying, some of us, I'm sure many of us, to get into the holiday spirit. And here I come, here on WPFW with my energy and enthusiasm. And we are in the midst of our year-end pitch drive, and we are trying really hard to get our WPFW community into the spirit of understanding that WPFW does not continue into 2026 confronting the lies and the misinformation and the bad propaganda coming from this regime and the U.S. empire in general. We don't survive in 2026 without your support, without your help, because this is true public radio. WPFW receives no government funding whatsoever. Despite what a lot of people think about public radio, this is not that type of station. We also do not receive any corporate sponsorship. That's why there are no commercials on this station. This station, WPFW, and the stations on the Pacifica Network are listener funded. This is community radio at its most grassroots. We remain on the air because of you. And you continue to support us because you like what you hear. Whether it's the jazz or the justice, you all have kept stepping up to the plate and helping us meet every need that we have had that has been compounded or made worse by the recent attacks. But it's been you, dear listeners, who have kept WPFW on the air, who have kept Darker Than Blue on the air, who actually have welcomed us into this fantastic listener-funded community here at WPFW. So I appreciate your support of this station, giving me the space to be a part of this family. So once again, I come to you asking for your support to keep WPFW, to keep Darker Than Blue, to keep Pacifica on the air, and to keep providing you with the information that you know you are not getting from CNN, MSNBC. Oh, that's right. They don't call themselves that now. I don't remember what they call themselves now, but I don't care. They're corporate funded. They're not WPFW. They don't tell you the truth about what's going on in the world of politics today, because it all affects you, whether you believe it or not. And I hope that when you listen to Darker Than Blue, I hope the things I talk about show you how important your understanding of politics, domestic and foreign policy, how it does impact your life. So if you are appreciative of the information that I provide, even if you don't always agree with me, if you appreciate the fact that I am able to come on this network, on WPFW, on these airwaves, and talk about this history and this truth that you're not getting on CNN or MSNBC, and certainly not Fox News, if you appreciate different, interesting, unusual, you might think perspectives, if you like hearing different perspectives about politics, if you like learning new things, if you appreciate what I do here at Darker Than Blue and the information that you hear, please support
this show for this hour, I have a $500 goal this hour. And you all have never, never not stepped up to the plate since Darker Than Blue has been a part of the WPFW family, which suggests to me that you like us being a part of this family. So I am looking forward to knocking this $500 goal out of the park. And it is really, really simple to do that. Did you know that you can support Darker Than Blue and WPFW with a $360 sustaining membership a year? Yes, $360 a year. How can you do such a thing in these tight times? Easy. Sustaining contributions that are taken out at monthly intervals, the same small amount, leading up to a large annual amount. So what does that mean? If you want to contribute $360 a year, well, that would mean a $30 a month sustaining gift. That's what you have to do when you call in and tell our volunteers that you want to be a sustaining member. You can do $30 a month, which would equal out to $360 a year. $25 a month, that's $300 a year. $20 a month, $240 a year, for less than what you spend on either cable TV or even the streaming services. $15 a month adds up to $180 a year. $10 a month, less than the cost of a movie ticket, $120 a year. We can definitely knock out this $500 goal for this hour. You can absolutely support WPFW and Darker Than Blue with a sustaining contribution that adds up to a very, very solid amount at the end of the year by doing monthly sustaining contributions. $500 goal that I have. Let's knock that out. But of course, dear listeners, we got to talk about Venezuela, don't we? Because everyone was expecting Trump to announce a war on Venezuela to be commenced last Wednesday or this past Wednesday, and that didn't happen. Thankfully, but that does not mean that the threat has passed. So where did this all start? So, in a post on X on Wednesday, Stephen Miller tweeted that American sweat, ingenuity, and toil created the oil industry in Venezuela. Its tyrannical expropriation was the largest recorded theft of American wealth and property. And he added these pillaged assets were then used to fund terrorism and flood our streets with killers, mercenaries, and drugs. These folks lie like breathing. If their lips are moving, if their fingers are moving on on their phones, they're lying. Miller also shared a screenshot of a True Social post from Trump from Tuesday, in which Trump accused Venezuela of stealing U.S. oil, land, and other resources, and using that oil to fund crime, terrorism, and human trafficking. Now, listen, I'm not sure how Venezuela stole oil from the United States and put it under their ground. But that's basically what these folks are saying, because the oil in Venezuela is in Venezuela. So it is Venezuela's oil to do with whatever they choose. But we know how the government of this country never wants a country that has resources that the rich can get richer off of in this country. They never want other countries to be able to use their resources for what they want. And just in case you were wondering, yes, there has been some activity in Congress about this foolishness. The House voted down a pair of measures that were supposed to halt the strikes on the alleged drug boats that the Trump regime has been carrying out and on Venezuelan land. Just the same day, Wednesday, hours after Trump announced the blockade on the South American country. Democrats sponsoring the measure were able to peel off only 2 Republicans on the first vote and 3 on the second as the GOP rallied around the White House. And on Tuesday, Trump announced a partial blockade, considered an act of war in international law. It is an act of war. against Venezuela after weeks of threatening military action. One of the Democrat lawmakers said, if we intensify hostilities in Venezuela, we have no idea what we're walking into. And I am telling y'all, we do not. We, meaning this country and this government. I don't mean to lay claim or ownership with them, but the we that this politician is talking about, yeah, they don't know what they're walking into, but I do, and I'm about to tell you why this government does not want to and find out. You know what I'm saying? So so yes, there were two resolutions that the Democrats tried to pass to stop the bombing of the boats. And at this point, I don't know why these folks think that this is that legislation is going to stop these people from doing anything when court orders are not stopping them from the illegal kidnappings that ICE is carrying out. Several courts have ruled against the Trump administration and these kidnappings, these warrantless kidnappings by ICE. They've also ruled against the Trump regime for keeping the National Guard in DC and California, and I believe they were ordered to leave, and they're still here. So I what do these people have outside of this? That's another question for another day. Anyway, but the House voted 216 to 210 against the measure that would allegedly stop or order the regime to stop bombing drug boats, and 213 to 211 against the land strikes measure, the provision, the measure that was supposed to make it illegal for bombing things on land in Venezuela. Both would have required Trump to seek congressional authorization for further attacks. And I think I feel like I really need to pause here, y'all, because the idea that one Republican woman who disagrees with Trump on one thing and is making a big deal about her retiring from Congress because Trump betrayed her after she did everything she could to defend everything that man said and did and get him elected, that doesn't make her a hero because she disagrees with him on one thing, because she absolutely voted against both of these measures. She did it. I don't. We make heroes out of the weirdest people. I don't understand why some of us do that. But anyway, this is going on right now. In Congress, also, the lead sponsor of the measure blocking an attack on Venezuela was Representative Jim McGovern, a Democrat from Massachusetts, who said that Trump seemed to be rushing headlong into a war without making the case for it. He said Americans do not want another Iraq. If we intensify hostilities in Venezuela, we have no idea what we're walking into. He's right. At least George Bush had the decency to come to Congress for approval in 2002. I don't know why they would call that decency, but that's what he said. Don't the American people deserve that respect today? Anyway, in 2002, yes, it's true, Bush did seek and receive a formal authorization for his attack on Iraq over lies, by the way. So what was decent about getting authorization to bomb another country over lies? That's not decent. But that's what happened. Trump has massed thousands of American service members in the Caribbean without formal approval, and I keep saying there are not a whole lot of people in the military opposing any of these orders. So what you think a piece of legislation going to do? Okay, rumors began to swirl in right-wing circles before the vote that Trump would use a Wednesday evening televised address to announce U.S. attacks directly at Venezuela, to announce war on Venezuela, but that did not happen, because I suspect that some folks in MAGA world did try to kind of walk him back from that a little bit, because I do think people inside his inner circle have been saying to him exactly what McGovern, I think, was saying, that we don't know what we're walking into here, and it does not look like the people in Venezuela are afraid at all, because we have been seeing, at least on social media, the people in Venezuela rejoining militias, because the militias were all already there, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But more people were rejoining or joining militias for the first time, young and old. The Venezuelan military is on high alert and deployed for response. And now I think it was just announced yesterday that President Nicolas Maduro has basically called Trump's war bluff and said that the Venezuelan Navy will now begin to escort Venezuelan oil tankers so that the United States does not hijack any more of Venezuela's oil, because that's what the Trump regime did by hijacking the Venezuelan oil tanker that was going to Cuba last week. That's illegal. That's piracy. And somehow somehow the US government condemns Somalians for piracy, but piracy committed by the US, that's okay. That's all right. Yeah, okay. So where does this idea that the U.S. thinks that Venezuelan oil belongs to them comes from? Where does that come from? I'm gonna tell you. But before I do, I have to thank Philip in Alexandria, Virginia. Thank you so much. Appreciate you. Now we have $400 to go, folks. Let's go. Let's get it. We can do it. WPFW is your station. I only talk about things that I think are important for us to know as people struggling under this system, in this system, trying to survive and make a better life and a better world for all of us. I know there's a lot of other stuff I could talk about, and every once in a while, sure, I'll talk about something frivolous, but I don't know if you've noticed lately, my friends, but we are fighting. We are at war. We are at war. And the last thing we need when we are at war is a bunch of frivolous, pointless, completely irrelevant information that you can't do anything with, that is not useful for your victory in this struggle. The information I provide here on Darker Than Blue contributes to a higher understanding of what it is we are fighting against, who is at war with us, why, so we can know how to fight, so we can win. So if you appreciate that, please, please support WPFW, support Darker Than Blue. Call 202 588 9739, 1 800 222 9739, or go to the website wpfwfm.org and pledge to Darker Than Blue, or you can go to the app that I hope you have downloaded on your phone, WhatsApp $WPFWFM. Please support Darker Than Blue, WPFW, $10 a month, $12.50 a month, $15 a month, $20 a month, $30 a month, or whatever you can afford a month, to be a sustaining member for the entire rest of the year, for 2026, to keep Darker Than Blue and WPFW on the air, providing this critical information that you are not getting from CNN and MSNBC or Fox News, because they're not going to tell you about the 2002 coup in Venezuela that the Venezuelan people still have very fresh in their memory. So let's talk about why the US, at least these freaks in the Trump administration, think that the oil in Venezuela belongs to the US and that they stole it. They actually don't think that. They're lying. They know they're lying, but that's how they do what they do. They did not amass the power they have by being truthful about any of the things they were doing or were going to do or why. So, U.S. companies began drilling for oil in Venezuela in the early 1900s. Okay. In 1922, vast petroleum reserves were initially discovered by Royal Dutch Shell in Venezuela's Lake Maracaibo in the Zulia state in northwestern Venezuela. Then the U.S. ramped up its investment in the extraction and development of Venezuelan oil reserves. you know that was not like we're going to enter into this agreement with you and the government of Venezuela to help Venezuelans. No, that was all for the profit and benefit of the United States. So companies like Standard Oil led development under concession agreements. And remember, we talked about concessions when we talked about China, right? And we talked about concessions in China and what that meant, the concessions that they were forced to give to the French and British colonial powers. These concessions in Venezuela over oil in 1920 or so were exactly the same kind of thing. All right. But these concessions that the US government pretty much forced the Venezuelan government into, and they weren't even a revolutionary government then in 1922, did lead to the US ramping up oil production and extraction out of Venezuela, largely for the benefit of US oil companies, not for Venezuela. But Venezuela was a founding member of OPEC, or is a founding member of OPEC, rather, joining at its creation on September 14th, 1960. So, Venezuela then nationalized its oil industry in 1976 for the first time, not under Hugo Chavez, under President Carlos Andres Perez amid the first oil boom, right? This was 50 years after the discovery of oil. And then the first president that nationalized the oil industry in 1976 was kind of a right wing sort of president, Carlos Andres Perez. He established the state owned Petróleos de Venezuela to control all oil resources. So even though he was not even a socialist, he understood that Venezuelan oil was Venezuela's. That's why he created PDVSA. Venezuela continued to be a major oil exporter to the US for some years, supplying millions of gallons a year. But then, after Hugo Chavez took office in 1998, he renationalized all oil assets because there's a pretty long history of U.S. intervention in between that 1976 and 1998. We only have an hour, so I don't have time to go into all of it, but I'm going to need you to go to Black Agenda Report and do a search on Venezuela and read all of the information that we have on that site about this history. All right, so Hugo Chavez takes office in 1998, nationalizes, renationalizes all oil assets, seized foreign owned assets. Why? Because foreign oil companies were taking the oil money and keeping it in their pocket. They were not giving the Venezuelan government the share that was supposed to be given to them. So Hugo Chavez said, okay, we're going to fix that. We are taking control of our resources. So when this regime, Trump and Miller and these people talk about Venezuela has stolen US oil, this is what they mean. This is what they mean. Venezuela under Hugo Chavez took control over their oil, their land, canceled the concessions, and kicked the US oil companies out of Venezuela because they were stealing the profits from those resources, and the Venezuelan people were not benefiting from them at all. So Chavez seized foreign owned oil assets, restructured PDVSA, and prioritized political goals over exports. What were the political goals? Housing, education, healthcare, food. That is what Hugo Chavez used the profits from PDVSA and selling Venezuelan oil on the mark on the global market. That's what he used that money for. Those were the political goals that Chavez focused on over exporting the oil for somebody else's profit. And of course, him doing this led to the decline in production, which is what ticked the US off, because that decline in production meant a decline in exports to them. So then the U.S. imposed sanctions on Venezuela. The first sanctions were imposed on Venezuelan oil in retaliation for nationalizing the oil assets were in 2005. Under U.S. sanctions, named individuals and companies are barred from accessing any property or financial assets held in the U.S. They can't access U.S. bank accounts, sell their property, or access their money if it passes through the U.S. financial system. And then any U.S. companies or citizens doing business with any sanctioned individual or company is penalized and risks becoming subject to enforcement actions. That's what sanctions do. But then the sanctions extend beyond the individuals, right? Any entity that is owned 50% or more, directly or indirectly, by one or more of the black blocked people is also sanctioned as well, even if that company is not explicitly named. And then, under President Nicolas Maduro, the U.S. imposed more sanctions in 2017 and even more in 2019. This further restricted sales to the U.S. and access for Venezuelan companies to global finance. As a result, oil exports to the U.S. nearly stopped, and Venezuela shifted its trade mainly to China and some sales to India and Cuba, because what else were they supposed to do with their resources that they have every right to trade with whomever they want to, if they want to continue funding the political priorities that support the Venezuelan people. When the US imposed sanctions on Venezuela because they nationalized their own resources so they could take care of their people. Please understand what I'm saying, dear listeners. The US government sanctioned the Venezuelan government under Hugo Chavez because Hugo Chavez wanted to take money from the sale of Venezuelan oil, excuse me, that was being used to make US and Canadian and European oil magnates even richer. Excuse me. While the Venezuelan people suffered, Hugo Chavez said, no, we're going to take that money and we're going to build housing and provide health care and education and provide good, clean, and nutritious and plentiful food to the poor and indigenous and Afro-descended people of Venezuela, the people on the bottom of society, the people that Hugo Chavez came from. And in retaliation for Hugo Chavez doing that, the United States imposed sanctions that led to less oil being exported to the US. And that is the excuse that the US government continues to use for not only imposing more sanctions on Venezuela, but now that this regime is using to justify going to war with Venezuela. They are calling this that the US has done to Venezuela. This regime is saying that Venezuela is stealing from the U.S. We're not dealing with logic here. We're dealing with white supremacy and settler colonialism, which are not logical at all. So, so we look now at the situation that is unfolding in the Caribbean, and it is absolutely horrifying because look, Trump has repeatedly voiced his desire for the US to regain control of Venezuela's oil. But is there any legal basis to these claims? No. No. There is no logical, legal, reasonable, there is no basis for any of what Trump or Stephen Miller or anybody in any US administration has to say about what this government wants to do with Venezuelan oil, because that oil is in the ground in Venezuela, so it belongs to them. International law is clear here that sovereign states own the natural resources within their territories under the permanent sovereignty over natural resources principle. And this means that sovereign states have the inherent right to control, use, and dispose of their resources for their development. And do y'all know that this concept of PSNR, permanent sovereignty over national resources, emerged after 1945 during the decolonization of former European colonies. It was solidified by the United Nations General Assembly in a resolution adopted in December of 1962. Under this law, therefore, Venezuela owns its own oil. It would be illegal for international law for the U.S. to lay claim to it. But did we really need to establish a law to declare that the resources in the ground of one country do not belong to another country that wants to control them just because they want to control them? I guess we did. Because, I mean, we live in a world dominated by pan European settler colonial imperialists who believe they have a right to lay claim to anything that they believe is in their backyard and within what they call their political interests, when it's all just settler colonial pan European imperialist greed. Now, excuse me, it is just half past the hour. So you know what time it is, dear listeners. It is time for our WPFW station break. And I'm so happy to say, friend in Portland, thank you so much. Appreciate you. 380 to go. So you all check your how you're going to contribute to WPFW and Darker Than Blue. Call now, 202-588-9739, 1-800-222-9739, WPFWFM.org/pledge, pledge to Darker Than Blue, Cash App, $ WPFWFM. Please pledge now. In the meantime, engineer extraordinaire, what do we have on tap for the people today?
Fellow members and supporters of WPFW, as you contemplate your year-end giving, if you are required to take a minimum distribution from your IRA, please join many of our donors and make a qualified charitable distribution from your IRA to WPFW. A QCD can satisfy all or part of your RMD from your IRA, and you can exclude that amount from your taxable income. To learn more about these and other tax-wise giving methods, please visit our website or send us an email at plangiving@wpfw.org. And as always, thank you so much for your continued support.
Thank you so much indeed. And I don't know what half of those acronyms that he used meant, but please follow directions, y'all. Continue to support WPFW however you can. Remember, we need sustaining members to keep us on the air throughout 2026 and beyond. That means for you, $10 a month. That would add up to $120 a year. $12.50 a month. That adds up to $150 a year. $15 a month, $180 a year. $20 a month, $240 a year. $30 a month, $360 a year. Become a monthly sustainer, supporting Darker Than Blue and WPFW. Please call now. We need your support. I need your support to keep this show and this station on the air. 202-588-9739 or 1-800-222-9739, or go to the web, WPFWFM.org, Cash App, $WPFWFM. Pledge now. I appreciate your support so much. So let's get back to a little bit of this history and let's talk about this coup in 2002. But first, for those of you who are my age and older, I am 58. Some of you are not old enough to remember that Venezuela used to distribute free oil to poor people in rural and urban America. Yes, they did. Venezuela's free oil program in the U.S. was a humanitarian initiative under President Hugo Chavez, where its state oil company at the time, Citgo, provided discounted or free home heating oil to low-income families in the U.S. via the U.S. nonprofit Citizens Energy, which was headed by a member of the Kennedy family that was not insane, Joseph Kennedy II. It's true. I remember those commercials. I remember that program. but the program was suspended due to Venezuela's economic woes. Y'all, yes, the free oil that Venezuela was giving to poor Americans as an act of solidarity and humanitarian aid was ended because the US government was angry that Venezuela took control of their oil to do exactly that. So, you want to talk about cutting off the nose of the people in this country to spite the. So, let's talk about this 2002 coup, because what the United States government is trying to do right now is not new. The Venezuelan people have sustained and withstood rather, decades of U.S. aggression. And we don't know this long history of repression against Venezuela, but the people of Venezuela and the people in the region, they know it all too well. And this is something I learned firsthand when I visited Venezuela in 2022. On April 11th through the 13th, Venezuela hosted the International Summit Against Fascism in Caracas. 200 journalists and activists from 5 continents attended the summit. That's why I was there, where the anniversary of the short-lived coup d'etat against Hugo Chavez 20 years ago was commemorated in the context of the importance of media in movements and as a milestone in the continued fight against the global consolidation of right-wing political forces and rising fascism. See, other countries have been talking about the coalescing fascism that the US has been pushing with its EU partners for decades. And we have been told, what fascism? Well, what are you talking about? What's fascist? Where's the fascism? I don't see any fascism. But there was no press coverage in the United States about this summit. So the US press, of course, has been busy lying about the war in Ukraine. That's what they were focused on then. But one of the issues being obscured by the US press at that time by those lies was the reason the summit in Venezuela was held. And that issue was fascism. Because, see, back in 2002, the US backed a coup in Venezuela that saw the right wing in the country kidnap President Hugo Chavez, secret him away somewhere, claim publicly that he had resigned, and swear in their US-backed coup president. Chavez had made enemies of the right wing in Venezuela and the neocons in Washington by daring to challenge the austerity and corruption of the old regime, the first guy, Perez, who first nationalized the oil industry. Yeah, I told you, he was not a socialist. So Chavez challenged the austerity and corruption of the old regime and tried to raise both the material conditions and the dignity of the working class and poor Venezuelan people. So Chavez and his Bolivarian revolution upset the neoliberal order in Venezuela and in Washington that was trying to enrich itself in Venezuela through control of the oil industry. And remember, excuse me, at that time, neoliberal policies were being implemented around the world in the wake of NAFTA, which saw the privatization of state-owned resources in many countries. I keep telling y'all, everything is connected. And where did NAFTA come from? Never forget that NAFTA was Bill Clinton's signature pieces of legislation. Former right-wing President Carlos Andres Perez had the IMF impose one of its brutal structural readjustment schemes in Venezuela, which led him to slash already paltry social spending budgets to meet the terms of the IMF. The working class and the poor in Venezuela, especially the indigenous and Afro-Venezuelans, already at the bottom of society's ladder, grew even more destitute as the rich made even more money off of the privatization of the country's agriculture, industry, and oil. And this is where Chavez, a leftist former military officer who embraced his indigenous and African roots, that man got on camera and said, "Do you see these lips? I am African." He did. I'm not even kidding. He really did say that. But he said it because it was so important that he recognized even the presence of Afro indigenous or Afro descended Venezuelans, because that was important for us here in the imperial core. Because some of us have this weird idea that this place and maybe the Caribbean are the only places where we exist, but we're literally we're pretty much all over the. So to have Hugo Chavez say that I am African, that meant everything. And that's also what the US politicians did not like. They never want any country's leader to have any kind of solidarity with Africa, African leaders, and certainly not Africans in this country. That solidarity can never be embraced and allowed to coalesce, right? We understand this, right? So Chavez comes in with his Fifth Republic movement, his political party, wins the 1998 election in Venezuela in a landslide. And the right wing in Venezuela and in the US were not happy. So Venezuela, under Chavez's Bolivarian Revolution, became the next target in the US's decades long imperialist campaign against quote unquote, quote, communism. Since around 1950, the US has backed violent right wing coups and sometimes carried out direct invasions in Guatemala, Cuba, Chile, Haiti, Grenada, imposed a 60-year blockade against Cuba, and armed right wing opposition to people's movements in countries like Nicaragua, Bolivia, El Salvador, and of course, in Venezuela. So, with all of that oil that was now under the control of socialist Chavez, who used the profits from oil revenue to bring healthcare and housing to the poor and working class, the Chavistas who voted for him to do just as he'd promised, were not gonna let that slide, that attempted coup. Aided by a secret police unit that was trained by the CIA, many Venezuelan leftists who supported Chavez were among the estimated 60,000 social reformers, socialists, and communists from Latin American countries who were kidnapped, tortured, and murdered since 1975. This was the bloody handiwork of the CIA's Operation Condor that supported fascist dictatorships all throughout Latin America to eradicate mostly left opposition to the neoliberal order. So Venezuela and its troublesome socialist president, Hugo Chavez, he was absolutely the next target. So on April 11, 2002, the news media in Venezuela broadcast reports of Chavez resigning or renouncing his presidency, as they put it. The next day, all of the morning news shows broadcast that Venezuela had a new president. And the rest of the day, every Venezuelan television station played cartoons to avoid answering the question that was rising up in the streets among the people, the Chavistas, the people who voted for Hugo Chavez to be their president. They started asking, ¿Dónde está Chavez? Where is Chavez? But the media didn't tell the people. That's why they played the cartoons all day, because they won't fit in to answer nothing. The media dictatorship, as it was described at the summit, tried its best to keep up the ruse of the resignation of Hugo Chavez. But the coup only lasted a few days, because the people got wind of the truth that Chavez had not, in fact, renounced the presidency, and they took to the streets to challenge the police, the military. Then they tackled the media. How did they do that? By literally cutting the cables of one of the main media outlets so they could no longer lie to the people. And on April 13th, the coup plotters had no choice but to return Chavez to Miraflores, the presidential palace. So the 3-day event in 2022 featured panel discussions about the right-wing forces the people of Venezuela defeated in 2002 compared to the fascist elements operating in countries across the global south, in Ukraine, as well as the relevant emergence of fascism in the United States that emanates from both political parties to support dictators and police states. Popular communication and the role of the media were extensively discussed. It was literally the focus of this conference, as the complicity of the Venezuelan media was recalled in several panel discussions. The coordination of all major Venezuelan media outlets to disseminate the lie that former President Hugo Chavez had relinquished his presidency in 2002 was not only recounted as part of the commemoration of the timeline of events of the overturned coup d'etat, but also compared to the present media consolidation of in the U.S. and those of its allies regarding Ukraine, and we see the same thing, only more intense in regard to Gaza and Sudan and Congo and Haiti, right? The willingness of media CEOs and news anchors to lie to the people of Venezuela in 2002 seemed to be a missed omen for what was described as the media dictatorship that is spinning on equally false narratives about all of those conflicts I just mentioned today. That's why they didn't want you to know about the people in Venezuela shutting down corporate media outlets, literally cutting the cables so they could not continue to broadcast lies, and then spreading the information that the people needed to fight this coup amongst themselves, literally building a grassroots people's communication network. Word of mouth, ham radios, those old hand crank copy machines to make flyers. That's how the people overturned that coup. The Venezuelan media was not the sole topic of the autopsy of the coup during this conference, though. The U.S. government's support of the violent and undemocratic right wing in the country was also a common theme raised by many presenters. The role of U.S. politicians like then Secretary of State Colin Powell and CIA Director George Tenet, who demonized Chavez in hearings before Congress, set the stage for U.S. intervention in Venezuela. Chavez had only been president for 2 years at the time of the coup, had committed two unforgivable offenses, according to Colin Powell and George Tenet and others in the U.S. government. He held meetings with the leaders of the sworn enemies of the U.S., and who were they? Cuba, Iran, and Libya. And he criticized the U.S. response to 9/11 in Afghanistan. Our comrades in the global South peeped how bad Afghanistan was from the jump. Kidnapped by the fascist plotters in the government and facilitated by the media, Chavez was secreted away and held captive for 2 days while the Venezuelan people were told by the media that there was a new president in town. But if that were the end of the story, there'd be no need for the conference. While the play-by-play of the coup revealed details that most Americans had surely never heard before, I sure had not, such as how all the media outlets declared there was a new government in place on the morning news, but played cartoons on their stations all day long to avoid the issue. The most fascinating and important aspect of this historical event was the role of popular communication among the people in returning Chavez to power and restoring the constitutional democracy that the people shaped under him. This is why WPFW, dear listeners, is so important. We are people's radio. We are not corporate funded. We are not government funded. We are a manifestation of this amazing popular people's communication front that I'm talking about, that the people in Venezuela created to get their president and their democracy back. We are doing the same thing right here on WPFW every Friday at 5 o'clock. Every public affairs show that you listen to, whether it's Resistance Radio with John Kane, whether it is News Views with Garland Nixon, whether it is a Full Spectrum with Anthony Rogers Wright, whether it's Jazz and Justice, whether it's Fantastic Fridays with Bobby Rocks, which I love and I know you love too, whether it's the beautiful blues programming on Saturday afternoons and mornings, or it's the jazz standards on Sundays. Everything you get here on WPFW is community funded, community supported, community focused to support the community for all of your needs to help you not just relax and center yourself in a good mental space with fantastic music, but also to give you the truth so you can fight the war that we are actively in effectively so we can absolutely win. So please, if you have not done so yet, call 202 588 9739. 1-800-222-9739. Go to the website, wpfwfm.org, or Cash App, $WPFWFM, and pledge to Darker Than Blue to keep this show and WPFW on the air. $380 to go. We can absolutely do it. So, this issue of the U.S. attacks on Venezuela, we need to understand that it is not only not new, but it is the continuation of a long and bipartisan history of this government actively trying to steal control of Venezuela's oil. And they do this knowing fully well that when a country does not control its own resources, the people in that country suffer, because the people who control the resources, who are not in that country, they keep all the money in their pockets. That's what this woman who was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in Venezuela, she is the female Juan Guaido. That is exactly what she wants the U.S. to do. She and the right wing in Venezuela have always wanted the U.S. to control Venezuelan oil so they can all get rich. And they know that working class and poor, indigenous, Afro-descended, and other marginalized Venezuelans will die. And they do not care. Please understand, please be clear that the U.S. government and every official in it that has a policy of aggression and sanctions toward and against Venezuela and Cuba and Nicaragua, they understand what these sanctions and what these policies and what these threats of militarism and invasion and coups, they know what will happen to the people of Venezuela. They know that the sanctions that this government have imposed on Venezuela has resulted in the deaths of, the last estimates, 7 years ago, 8 years ago, was that the sanctions were responsible for the deaths of at least 40,000 Venezuelans. We know it's much more than that now, probably over 100,000. And the people in this government know that, and they don't care, because what they want is to get rich themselves. They didn't even care about the fact that Venezuela, Hugo Chavez specifically, was giving oil away to poor Americans who would have frozen to death, quite frankly, had he not tried to help poor people in this country with heating oil who couldn't afford it. And they didn't just do this. He didn't just do this with the U.S. There was also the Petrocaribe program that was eviscerated in Haiti that the U.S. knew was a lifeline for Haiti, but they propped up their government in Haiti, and the people they propped up in Haiti stole all the Petrocaribe money. And the U.S. government is fine with that, because the Haitians didn't vote for any of the people who are running that country, the United States government. And way too many leaders of other countries, a couple of countries from the global south too, are on that core group making these decisions, stealing from the Haitian people, while they're all in league with punishing Venezuela for wanting to take care of people's needs with their resources. So that is the situation. That is the situation that the Venezuelan people are facing in this current moment of this Trump regime threatening a war against Venezuela. This is shocking to us because we don't know this history. And this history is kept from us for obvious reasons, because we are never supposed to know how murderous and awful and genocidal this government has always been to other countries that have resources that it wants, so that the ruling class in this country can stay and get even more rich. And what happens to the people in the countries that they invade, carry out coups in, or occupy, they don't care. I want us to be clear about the fact that there is no appealing to the morality of the right wing in Venezuela. There is no appealing to the morality of the people in this regime. There is no appealing to the morality of the people in the Democratic Party, because they impose sanctions on Venezuela too. They are all in on this. They want to destroy the Bolivarian revolution as well, and they want to get rid of any vestige of leftism, any government that does not want to allow the United States and its Western friends to control and get rich off of their resources while the people in their countries die of imposed poverty. This government wants to control the resources in every country in the Western hemisphere that it can. And if it can control every country in the world, it will do it. And if this country, whoever is leading this government, has to start a war in order to realize that, so they can realize those super profits from everyone else, they'll do it. We need to be clear that these are the people who have declared war on us and on our brothers and sisters around the world. So there's a little bit of the history that you didn't know about Venezuela that I hope gives you more context for this moment that we are facing. Thank you so much, friend in Hyattsville, Maryland. $280 to go. Listen, y'all, we've got a few minutes left. 202-588-9739, 1-800-222-9739. Please call and pledge whatever you can to keep community radio, people's radio, grassroots radio, WPFW on the air. Keep Darker Than Blue on the air. Thank you so much for listening tonight. Stay tuned for News Views with Garland Nixon, and I will see you next time next week on Darker Than Blue. A luta continua. The struggle continues, but if we keep telling the truth, and if you keep WPFW on the air, Victoria acerta. Victory is certain. Thank you so much. See you next time. Peace. All right, y'all. Let me end this. There we go. And have that converting. There I am. Oh, that's just weird. There we go. All right, here you go. Woo-wee. Lord have mercy. All right, so I'm glad that I got a chance to do a talk about my trip to Venezuela again in 2022. I realized that for us in us USians, everything we know about other countries comes from what we learn in school, and what we are told by this government about other countries, which means we don't know shit. That's what it means. It means we don't know shit about other countries. And quite honestly, we don't know shit about this country. We don't know anything about the actual history of this country and the way this government has interacted with the governments and the people of other countries. Everything that this government and this media, which is the mouthpiece of this government, everything they have told us about other countries are lies. Everything they tell us about Venezuela. And I saw some of the comments over here in the chat, some of the little people on, oh, bless your little hearts. Oh, Nicolas Maduro had his own people eating rotten meat. Really? Pictures. I need pictures and video. I need evidence, because You can, all right. So, some random person gets on a stream, and I have pictures and video. I was in Venezuela. And yes, I absolutely saw the the impact of the sanctions. Absolutely. But I also saw the cruelty and the hatefulness of the right wing, because the right wing in the country controls a lot of the businesses, the corporate, the chain brands, and they know that the sanctions that the US has imposed on the Bolivarian government has kept the government from using actually has kept the government from making the resources, the money that it needs to continue to care for the people, to provide for the people. So yeah, people are still suffering economically in ways that they would not be had the sanctions not been imposed on the government. But when you know the history between the US and Venezuela, you understand that the poverty you see is because of those sanctions. But then you got people like these folks in the chat, little white folks in Idaho somewhere, sitting there on their fucking compound, just angry at all the brown people who are allegedly taking things from them, and they living out in the middle of nowhere on a dirt patch surrounded by sheep, which is probably safe for everybody else. Fucking stay there. but but you know I've been to Venezuela, and I know Venezuelans, and I work with Venezuelans. And you think you're gonna come on here and, oh, Nicolas Maduro said, sounding like Colin Powell and George Tenet and all of these pigs in this government who have been on a decades long campaign to steal the resources from the people in another country. Ultimately, that is what people are arguing they are in support of. I don't care what it is people think about Venezuela and Maduro and what actually happened. Ultimately, when you make the discussion about what you claim Maduro is doing to its people, and you don't pay any attention to what this government actually has done and is doing to cause hardship, economic precarity, and death to people in Venezuela, what you're saying is, I don't give a shit about those people in Venezuela. I don't care. I don't care if they do die, because we should have that oil. That's what you're. And I don't. Why should anybody have? There's no reasoning with people who would make that kind of an argument. There's no humanity in that argument. There's no logic in that argument. So what kind of discussion do you think we're gonna have when you are arguing on the side of the genocidaires? So this history is the same, is what we do not understand about where we are now with Venezuela and the Caribbean and Cuba also. So we have to understand that in Venezuela, when this coup happened, the people didn't just take to the streets. The people went to Miraflores, where the Venezuelan military was commanded by the right wing to defend the presidential palace. That's what Miraflores is. It's the presidential palace. It's like the White House. And I hate making that comparison, but I know that's the only frame of reference people have, and that's okay. So the people went to Miraflores and they confronted the military. And why did the right wing have the military guarding Miraflores? Because remember, by day two, the right wing had sworn in their US backed president, but he was kind of trapped in Miraflores because the people showed up and they confronted the military, demanding the release of President Chavez. Now, the few media images that I remember seeing in the US about this coup, I saw at the museum that we went to in Venezuela about this. And I'll talk more about that in a little bit. But media images from the people flooding the streets, they were pressing on the gates of Miraflores, the presidential palace, with signs saying, "Donde está Chavez? ¿Qué hablas? Where is Chavez? What do you say?" These details and others about how popular resistance among the people, and look, these were not middle class, these were not rich people, these were working class and poor, indigenous, Afro descended, just regular folks in Venezuela who had, remember, they had just voted for Hugo Chavez in a landslide, one of the few bloodless revolutions that we have to reference. So these details and others about how popular resistance among the people overturned the first ever media-led US-backed fascist coup in 2002, that's the way it was described at this conference in Venezuela, were shared during this conference, which also connected that history with the need to commit to and expand popular communication today. This was in 2022, this conference. So the challenges facing popular communication were raised in panels involving current Venezuelan journalists who talked about World War 2.0, the digital political communication in globalization. They were having these conversations then. They focused on the power of social media and independent media in the struggle against global fascism and its rapid consolidation. The coup in 2002 was an example for how media consolidation was used to subvert the will of the people then, and how media consolidation does the same thing then in 2022, and certainly today in 2025. To accentuate that point, I thought this was very interesting. There was a journalist from Ukraine who was on one of these panels. Her name was Lyubov Alexandriana Korsakov, and she presented details about the 8-year civil war that had raged in the Donbas region, carried out by Kiev against Donbas, right? She spoke of media silence on that, the 8-year civil war that Kiev carried out against Donbas, with media complicity in crafting a false narrative about the Russian military action in Ukraine. And at the end of her presentation, I thought that this blew my mind. She held up a flag of the Donbas militia, and that flag was emblazoned with the letter Z, and urged continued support and journalistic attention on the fight against fascists in the Kiev army who were armed and legitimized by the US. And you know, we have talked about that several times. A flag and a letter, incidentally, that have been banned in Kiev by the so-called democratic government of Volodymyr Zelensky. Yep, she said that when she held up that flag. I didn't know anything about that. I didn't know anything about the Donbas militia. I didn't know they had a flag. I didn't know that the Z was there for. You didn't hear about any of that in the US. And if you did, it was lied about. So then we also attended Militia Day in Venezuela, which was very important to the 2002 coup, because Militia Day celebrations was a disconcerting experience for me, since in the US, citizens' relationship with the police and the military, it's not an amicable one, right? Even though many of them come from the working class and poor masses here, right? However, the legacy of April 13th, or April 11th and 13th, as well as the Bolivarian Revolution, reshaped the relationship between the people and the military in Venezuela, because the story of how the people found out that Chavez was indeed still president is absolutely incredible. And of course, we were not told this in this country, but I learned it in Venezuela. A young soldier, hearing from the media, like everybody else in the country heard that Chavez had resigned, was tasked with guarding the kidnapped president. So the soldier asked Chavez if it was true, if he really did resign. Chavez told him that he had not resigned and he would never do such a thing. So this soldier convinced Chavez to write a letter, sign it, and put it in a nearby trash can because no one would look for anything in the trash can. And what he would do was retrieve the letter and get it to whoever Chavez told him to so that person could get the letter to the people. So Chavez did it. He wrote a letter saying, I, Hugo Chavez, did not renounce the presidency. I am still the president of Venezuela. I am alive, blah, blah, blah. The soldier does what he says he's going to do. Chavez puts the letter in the trash can. The soldier takes the letter out of the trash can and delivered it to the former attorney general like Chavez asked him to. But then he went further. He went on to tell his fellow service members about Chavez not resigning. He told his fellow service members that I have proof that the lie about Chavez resigning is indeed a lie. Meanwhile, the attorney general has the letter. He takes it to the media and he utters one sentence because that's all they would let him say. Once the former attorney general has a microphone in front of his face, he says one thing: President Chavez has not renounced. And that was enough to set the people into the streets to defend their constitution and demand the return of Chavez. But on the way, they were met by soldiers that were dispatched by the right wing, and the soldiers were told to open fire on the people of Venezuela, and some of them did. But then the Venezuelan people pleaded with the soldiers to adhere to the Constitution that they participated in shaping. And that's what turned a lot of those soldiers against the right wing. And then the soldiers began turning around and saying, you know what? That's right. Where is Chavez? Yeah, that's right. So Militia Day in Venezuela does not present the contradictions of the military being agents of the state who are against the people as they operate in the U.S. Despite whatever internal struggles and contradictions they experience, the military largely supported and continues to support the Bolivarian revolution that they were key in restoring on April 13th. President Nicolas Maduro commemorated April 11th with a press conference to honor the people's popular resistance to the coup with the attendees of the summit as his special guests. Maduro sat behind a remarkably simple, long desk with a portrait of Simon Bolivar and the Venezuelan flags adorning the podium as he recounted the deep history of April 11th through the 13th, complete with showing relevant newsreels and providing several well-timed and sharply pointed jabs at the coup plotters and their backers in the U.S. Maduro has jokes. He's a really funny guy. He really is. I'm not kidding. He has jokes. But even as he recounted the steps leading up to the coup and how it was overturned by popular resistance and communication, he also took the opportunity not just to focus on Venezuela's struggle, but to offer solidarity to Chilean victims of fascist police violence in the city of Renato and offer the same assistance to Colombians suffer the same fate. And you're going to have to look up what was going on in Colombia and Chile at that time in 2022. The current struggles in Venezuela against ongoing U.S. oppression are not disconnected from Hugo Chavez. He is not in the past, but he is very present in the consciousness of the people he focused on the most: the indigenous, the Afro-Venezuelans, peasants in the mountains, the poor in the barrios in the hills above Caracas, and throughout the country. We visited the Cuartel 4F and museum, the final resting place and museum for President Chavez, which is located among the people in the mostly poor barrio of the Mont Piedad sector, where Chavez tried to wage his armed struggle against the fascist government of Carlos Andrés Pérez in 1992. Remember, Pérez was the first one to nationalize Venezuela's oil industry. But he was still a fascist. The US didn't have a problem so much when Perez nationalized the industry because Perez gave the US the concessions. Okay, I just want us to be clear about that. After being pardoned from prison, though, in 1994, because yes, Chavez was unsuccessful in his armed struggle against Perez. He was thrown in jail, but then he was pardoned 2 years later. Chavez started the Fifth Republic movement, which was more centrist than revolutionary when it started, but was focused on lifting those Venezuelans who had been left out of the political process and society up and bringing them into participating in a new kind of government. So Chavez didn't even start off as a hardcore socialist communist. He was trying to be conciliatory. So visiting the museum at the Cuartel de Foref, where his body lies in a marble encased tomb, surrounded by ceremonial guards and reflective pools of water, it is very, very serene and a very, very powerful. And he is next to Simon Bolivar, I believe. Chavez's grassroots political education in the speeches he gave in those neighborhoods on flatbed trucks, speaking to people in forgotten villages in the mountains and in the middle of the most impoverished barrios in the cities is showcased. Those pictures of those speaking tours, those public speaking engagements, where Chavez is literally standing on the back of a truck talking to thousands of people, are all around the courtyard of the Cuartel de Foref. Inspired by his desire to free all Venezuelans from poverty, inequality, oppression, and political isolation, the people voted in record numbers to put Chavez in the presidential office in 2000. And as a result, one of his first acts was to immediately begin the process of including the people who voted for him in rewriting the country's constitution. That was the beginning of the Bolivarian Revolution, and the coup in 2002 was designed to stop the true people-powered and focused state in Venezuela from taking shape. I saw for myself and understood the struggles to maintain and grow that revolution, a bloodless one in this case, as the Venezuelan state owns only PDVSA, the oil company, and its revenue from that is redistributed to the people. The oil revenue, the oil reserve money built 3.5 million housing units in Venezuela. We saw some of those housing units. 3.5 million housing units. And that's why you do not see homeless people when you go to Caracas today. But nearly everything else is controlled by private corporations, owned by oligarchs who are supported by Washington. So when the U.S. Treasury Department froze $7 billion of PDVSA assets, when the Bank of England stole $2 billion in Venezuelan gold, and when the U.S. continued to impose sanctions on the Bolivarian government of Venezuela, but not on the oligarchs that control private corporations and steal from the Venezuelan people, they know full well that they are starving the poorest people in Venezuela, and they will keep doing it and support the right wing and the fascists in Venezuela and the mostly right-wing expat community of Venezuelans in the U.S. to chip away at the revolution from the inside. Walking through the exhibit commemorating April 11th through the 13th, taking in the sights and the sounds and the lessons of that time, illuminated for me how Chavez's revolution spurred the people to defend their new democracy against the most powerful fascist state in the world, the United States, if you weren't clear. The inspiration he drew upon from his own upbringing as one of the forgotten poor in a small village, to his faith in Jesus Christ as a force for social equality and liberation. Yes, he did really believe that. And if you talk to a whole bunch of Venezuelan Christians who are Chavistas today, they will tell you the same thing. His commitment to protecting the people and environment they live in was on full display to erase any confusion about the ability for those concepts of faith and revolution to coexist successfully. They did in Chavez and in the Chavista movement, and they do still in many Venezuelans who will openly weep today if you ask how they feel about their comandante. At the end of the summit, the phrase, the people united will never be defeated, took on a whole new and relevant meaning in life for me. And the word democracy has a legitimate meaning. It meant a real thing. I saw what actual democracy looks like in Venezuela. And then I came back here and realized, nope, we got nothing like Venezuela. We got nothing like democracy in this place. In Venezuela, I learned what the Bolivarian Revolution really is, and that it is still in progress, as all revolutions are if they are true people's revolutions, because they must continue to be defended against constant threats from the right wing and their fascist foot soldiers, who are always backed by the U.S. And I learned that we had better be as committed to ending imperialism from the inside of this beast to truly be in solidarity with those who are the victims of it. And that includes breaking the media dictatorship in this country and supporting and building people's media. And we must do so much more, that quite honestly, we're not doing enough of right now. Until we defeat imperialism, we will always suffer under imperialist aggression, warmongering, and pillaging of other countries, because they dare to use their resources to take care of the needs of their most vulnerable people, instead of allowing a few foreign white capitalists and their Spanish descended right wing countrymen get rich while everyone else suffers and dies. Fight or die. Those are our choices. They always have been. So I'm going to leave you with a link to this documentary that I also found out about after I came from Venezuela, and it is called "The Revolution Will Not Be Televised." And I'm going to share just a little bit with you right now. Come on, screen thing. There we go. Let's see if I can get you just a few minutes of this. It's a little opening disclaimer where you can get more information. I'm not sure if the fire office is still open under this regime, but here we go. Hmm. Yep. Hmm. Look, when I tell you Venezuelans love Hugo Chavez, it is not hyperbole. I talk to so many people who, when I ask them, what do you think Hugo Chavez's legacy is? I talked to people who told me about how hard their life was in Venezuela, how they were always afraid for their safety because of the right wing. And Hugo Chavez comes in and treats them with dignity, with respect, and includes them in the shaping of the country and improve their lives. And I've seen so many people in Venezuela, talked to so many people just here because of what that man did for their lives directly. This was the celebration after the coup was overturned.
Aquí en Venezuela, como en casi toda la América Latina, venía galopando el proyecto, que hay una mano invisible el mercado que todo lo arregla. Mentira, mentira, mil veces mentira. Claro que hay otros caminos y en Venezuela lo estamos demostrando. He tenido que aguantar las más grandes presiones internacionales, pero no me importa nada. Si algún día me toca bajar al quinto infierno para defender al pueblo bolivariano de Venezuela, pues me iré al quinto infierno a defenderlo de Mandinga.
So yeah, I gave you the link to this video, to this documentary. It is really a great documentary. The information that we have not been given about what this government did in 2002, and really the whole history of what the US has done in Venezuela, we really need, and not just in Venezuela, in all of Latin America. Please read what is the name of the book? Open Veins of Latin America. By Eduardo. Ooh, what is his last name? Y'all know what his last. Somebody's going to put in the chat. But the book is Open Veins of Latin America. Read up on Operation Condor and understand what this government has done throughout every Latin American country. These people talking about the Democrats and Republicans talking about they hate immigration, illegal immigration. Oh, we have to get all the criminal illegal aliens out of the country. The criminals are the people who run this government. They have caused people to flee their homes because of the invasions, the occupations, the attempted coups, and the successful coups, all to steal the resources that exist in other people's countries, that this government does not want the governments of those countries to control for the benefit of their people. This government has never cared about how many people have to die in order for the ruling class to stay and get even richer. They have never cared, never, ever cared. So let's stop believing that we can reform this system in this country to make these people do right. Let's stop believing that we can vote in better people into a rotten, genocidal, white supremacist, settler, colonial, patriarchal, occupational, that doesn't sound right, occupation force. Can stop. The system needs to go. And there is no one in this system that is going to stop any of this. Do we all notice that courts and judges have ordered the National Guard be recalled from Washington, D.C. and California and Portland? And how come they're still there? These people aren't paying any attention to any courts. Oh, you're going to pass legislation to make it illegal? You think you're going to pass a law to make Pete Hegseth show that video? He ain't showing shit. And he has said, I'm not showing shit. So what you going to do? They can't be reasoned with. So what are you going to do? People in Venezuela showed us what we have to do. Our problem is we're too busy nitpicking at each other to get together like the people of Venezuela did and take care of business. So, all right, thanks y'all for hanging out with me this evening. I appreciate you. I would like to say I'm going on a break, but I'll be back Friday because I do have to do a show for WPFW. But I just might find a couple of pre-recorded things that and put them up because we need a little bit of break. We do need a little bit of Christmas joy, even though there is so little of it in the world, particularly since the birthplace of Christmas is being genocided right now. But I'm with you, Lady Alex. Peace, love, and fuck the empire. That's a fantastic way to end this show tonight. Thank you so much. Peace, love, and fuck the empire. Oh, let me say hi and thank you to everybody. Is C on here? see Celestin and Mama Celestin. I hope so. I love y'all, and I'm so glad that you all are right. Mwah. Love you, Rao. Holo. Y'all are the Instagram folks, and I can't pronounce your thing. Allgall 00. 2Fs, what's going on? Chitimacha, what's going on? David Silberg, Leah, how are you? No innocent white. Okay, that's great. Good to see you. Oh my gosh. Let me see if I can go all the way back up to the top. Make sure I don't miss it. Oh, Yipper, how you doing? Good to see you. Eric Berkeley, good to see you. Uh oh yeah, that prick. Anyway, all right. Thank you all so much for joining. I hope you all have a good week. I'm sure there are going to be mobilizations that I'll be involved in next week, but this weekend, I'm just going to try to relax, and I hope you do too. Thanks so much for joining. Talk to y'all next time. Peace.